The bond between me and Jeff was something most people could only dream of having. We weren't just friends. We were brothers in every sense but blood. From grade school to college, from our police academy days to standing as each other's best men at our weddings, we had been through it all together. He knew my deepest secrets, celebrated my highest highs, and stood by me during my lowest lows. So when I discovered that the woman I loved more than anything, the person I vowed to spend the rest of my life with, had betrayed me not once, but twice, it felt like someone had ripped out my heart and stomped on it. The betrayal didn't come from a stranger or some distant acquaintance. It came from Devin, my wife, and Jeff, my so-called brother. It wasn't just an affair, it was a calculated act of deceit that shattered everything I thought I knew about trust, loyalty, and love. And then there was the pregnancy. When Devin told me she was pregnant, my world stopped spinning for a moment. At first, I wanted to believe it was possible that maybe fate had decided to throw us a curveball, despite what I knew deep down. But here's the thing. I couldn't be the father. Not because I didn't want to be, but because biology itself had made it impossible years ago. You see, after my first marriage ended, I underwent a vasectomy. It wasn't something I shouted from the rooftops, but it was a decision I made with clarity and purpose. Back then, Trish, my ex-wife, and I agreed that 2 kids were enough. We wanted to focus on raising them without worrying about adding another child to the mix. The surgery was simple, quick, and effective, a clean break from any future surprises. When Devin and I started dating, kids were never part of the conversation. She didn't want them, and honestly, neither did I, not anymore. Or so I thought. But now, staring at that little stick with 2 pink lines glaring back at me, I felt the ground beneath me crumble. How could this happen? Was it some cruel twist of fate? A miracle? No. Deep down, I already knew the truth before Devin even opened her mouth. There was no way this baby was mine. Science doesn't lie, and neither does probability. Less than 1% chance? That wasn't luck, it was a red flag waving violently in my face. Every instinct screamed at me that something was horribly wrong. And yet, Devin looked at me with those wide eyes, trembling lips, and whispered words meant to fill me with joy. Instead, they filled me with dread. As the reality sank in, the pieces began falling into place like shards of glass cutting deeper with every revelation. Devin hadn't just dropped hints, she practically painted a neon sign pointing toward the truth. Late-night texts exchanged with Jeff while I lay beside her, pretending to sleep. Secretive giggles over inside jokes I wasn't privy to. Gifts appearing mysteriously, a bottle of massage oil left half-used, its scent lingering faintly on both their skin. Each detail gnawed at my mind until suspicion turned into certainty. My best friend, the man who stood beside me at my wedding, the guy I trusted implicitly, was sleeping with my wife. And worse still, he might have been the father of the child growing inside her. Every memory we shared suddenly felt tainted. Those camping trips where Jeff stayed up late talking to Devin around the fire? They weren't innocent conversations, they were stolen moments. The concerts they attended together under the guise of friendship. Betrayals disguised as fun outings. Even the way Devin casually mentioned Jeff's name in passing became unbearable. Jeff said this. Jeff did that. It was like she couldn't go 5 minutes without bringing him up. Meanwhile, I sat silently collecting evidence, piecing together the puzzle of their treachery. Every touch, every glance, every laugh, it all pointed to one horrifying conclusion. The woman I loved and the man I called my brother had conspired against me. What made it even harder to swallow was how methodical it seemed. Devin must have planned this carefully, banking on the fact that I'd never reveal my secret. After all, why would I? Who expects their spouse to cheat, let alone with their closest friend? But the irony wasn't lost on me. My decision to keep quiet about the vasectomy, the very thing I hoped would protect my privacy, had become the smoking gun exposing their lies. As Devin clutched that positive pregnancy test in her hand, smiling through tears of fake excitement, I realized the full weight of her deception. This wasn't just about infidelity. It was about manipulation. She wanted me to play along, to raise another man's child as my own, all while living a lie. And Jeff? He was content to live in the shadows, playing house in our garage suite like some twisted version of suburban bliss. In that moment, I understood two things with crystal clarity. First, nothing would ever be the same again. Second, I needed answers and justice. As the days turned into weeks, the cracks in Devin and Jeff's facade began to show small at first, almost imperceptible, but growing wider with each passing moment. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Just my imagination running wild. But then the signs became impossible to ignore. Devin and Jeff were inseparable, their bond morphing from what I once thought was harmless friendship into something far more sinister. They started going out together without me, lunch dates, errands, even movies, and every time I asked about it, Devin brushed me off with a laugh or an excuse that felt rehearsed. "Oh, we just ran into each other," she'd say, as if fate had conveniently brought them together over and over again. And the texts? Those late-night exchanges that buzzed incessantly on her phone while I lay beside her, trying to initiate intimacy only for her to push me away with a distracted smile. She'd giggle under her breath, typing furiously, completely oblivious to how hollow it made me feel. But it wasn't just the secrecy, it was the little things, the subtle shifts in behavior that screamed betrayal. Devin used to cook dinner for us, always making sure there was enough for everyone. Now she dished up plates for herself and Jeff, leaving me to fend for myself. When he laughed at one of her jokes, she'd touch his arm lightly, her fingers lingering longer than necessary. And when she leaned in close to hear him speak, I could see the way he grazed her elbow, a gesture so intimate it made my stomach churn. The worst part? It happened right in front of me, as though they didn't care whether I noticed, or maybe they wanted me to. Then there was the scent. That faint, unmistakable aroma clinging to them both. One day, I found a half-used bottle of massage oil tucked away in our bathroom cabinet. Its distinct fragrance lingered on Jeff's skin the next time I saw him. Devin claimed it was nothing, just lotion, but the lie hung heavy in the air between us. Each detail, a careless touch, a whispered conversation, a shared glance was like a shard of glass cutting deeper into my trust. Alone, they might have been innocent. Together, they formed a picture too clear to deny. Devin and Jeff weren't just friends anymore. They were conspirators, stealing moments behind my back, building a life I wasn't part of. And as much as I wanted to believe otherwise, the truth was undeniable. They were betraying me in the most intimate way possible. The moment Devin told me she wanted a baby, my blood ran cold. It wasn't the words themselves, it was the way they landed, heavy and calculated, like a storm cloud rolling in to blot out the sun. She had never once expressed any interest in having children during our entire relationship. In fact, she'd been adamant about not wanting kids at all, which is why I never felt the need to tell her about my vasectomy. But now, here she was, lying beside me in bed, her voice trembling with what I assumed was supposed to be excitement, saying, "I think we should have a baby." My mind raced as I tried to piece together her sudden change of heart. Was this really about starting a family, or was it something far more sinister? The timing couldn't have been worse or more suspicious. When she handed me that pregnancy test just days later, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Positive. 2 pink lines staring back at me like an accusation. My stomach churned as I realized the full weight of what was happening. Devin wasn't just carrying someone else's child, she was trying to pass it off as mine. Every instinct screamed at me to confront her then and there, but I knew better. If I wanted answers and justice, I had to play along until I could gather enough evidence to expose their betrayal. That night, as Devin slept soundly beside me, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me, I began planning my next move. I couldn't let them continue living under my roof, laughing behind my back while plotting how to raise Jeff's child as though it were my own. No, they needed to leave, and quickly. Early the next morning, before either of them woke up, I got to work. I changed the locks on every door, reset the garage code so Jeff couldn't get into his suite, and started packing. Box after box, I filled them with Devin's clothes, shoes, makeup, everything. Then I moved on to Jeff's things, hauling them down from the garage suite and tossing them into the trailer parked outside. By the time Devin came home, the house looked unrecognizable, and so did my resolve. When she saw the trailer and found herself locked out, panic flashed across her face. She banged on the door, yelling for me to let her in, but I stayed calm, speaking to her through the doorbell camera. "It's over," I said, my voice steady despite the rage boiling beneath the surface. "I know the baby isn't mine." Her reaction was instantaneous: tears, denials, accusations, but none of it mattered anymore. When Jeff arrived minutes later, his patrol car screeching to a halt in front of the house, the scene turned chaotic. He shouted, she cried, and I stood firm, watching the life I thought I knew crumble around me. For the first time in months, I felt in control. The day the paternity test results came back was the day my entire world burned to ashes. I sat in the sterile, fluorescent-lit room of the lab, staring at the paper that confirmed what I already knew deep down. The child Devin carried wasn't mine, it was Jeff's. The words on the page blurred as anger and betrayal surged through me like wildfire. But what hit hardest wasn't just the confirmation itself. It was Devin's reaction when I confronted her later that evening. She didn't even try to deny it. Instead, she crumbled under the weight of her lies, tears streaming down her face as she admitted everything. "I thought you'd never find out," she whispered, her voice trembling with desperation. "I thought we could make it work." Her confession gutted me. She had planned this from the start, pretending the baby was mine, so I wouldn't suspect a thing. Every smile, every touch, every word she spoke about our future family had been a lie. Devin wasn't just having an affair with my best friend. She was trying to rewrite reality, forcing me into a role I was never meant to play, the oblivious cuckold raising another man's child. And Jeff? He knew all along. That bastard played along too, living in the garage suite like some twisted house guest, while secretly plotting how he'd step into the role of fatherhood without ever taking responsibility. When Devin realized there was no way to salvage what was left of our marriage, she made one last desperate move. She followed Jeff to a remote northern town where he'd been transferred. They thought they could escape the wreckage they created, start fresh far away from prying eyes. But their new life wasn't the happy ending they dreamed of, it was exile. Devin went from being a vibrant woman surrounded by friends and family to a shadow of herself, stuck in a cold, unfamiliar place with nothing but guilt and regret for company. Meanwhile, I stayed behind, picking up the pieces of my shattered existence. The irony wasn't lost on me. My secret vasectomy, the very thing I kept hidden to avoid complications, ended up saving me from raising a child who wasn't mine. But the cost? My trust, my dignity, and any semblance of peace I once had. The aftermath of Devin's betrayal left me hollow, like a shell of the man I used to be. Filing for divorce wasn't just a legal process, it was an emotional exorcism, ripping out every last shred of trust I'd ever had in love and relationships. The courtroom felt more like a battlefield, each session dragging me deeper into bitterness, as Devin tried to paint herself as the victim. But I knew the truth, and so did she. In the end, we walked away strangers, bound only by the children we shared. Being a single father is no small feat, especially when your faith in humanity feels shattered. Every bedtime story, every school event, every scraped knee, it all reminded me of what I lost, but also of what I still had to fight for, my kids. At first, loneliness consumed me. Nights were the hardest, sitting in that empty house, replaying every lie, every touch, every moment of deceit over and over again in my mind. I questioned everything. How could I have been so blind? How could someone I loved so deeply hurt me so profoundly? But then, slowly, the people who truly mattered began showing up. Trish, my ex-wife, became my rock. She didn't judge. She just listened. My parents, old friends, even coworkers, they rallied around me, reminding me that life doesn't stop because one chapter ends. Their support gave me strength, not just to survive, but to thrive. I may never fully trust another person again, but I've learned to channel my pain into being the best dad I can be. Because at the end of the day, my kids are worth fighting for, even if it means starting over from scratch. For 2 decades, my wife and I were the embodiment of a perfect love story, the kind people envy and aspire to. We met in high school, two awkward teenagers who somehow found each other amidst the chaos of adolescence. Our bond deepened with every milestone: prom nights, college graduations, building careers, buying our first home, raising children. Together, we created a life that felt untouchable, uncheckable, a fortress built on trust, loyalty, and shared dreams. Friends often called us the golden couple, and for years, I believed it too. But perfection is fragile, a delicate illusion easily shattered by reality's cruel hand. Then came the day her sister passed away. It wasn't just grief, it was devastation, an earthquake that tore through the foundation of everything we thought we were. Her sister had been more than family. She was her confidant, her mirror, her anchor. They shared secrets no one else could understand, laughed over inside jokes only they could decipher. When cancer took her, it left behind a void so vast that nothing seemed capable of filling it, not even me. At first, I tried to be strong for her, holding her as she cried herself to sleep night after night. But there was something haunting about the way she looked at old photographs or read through journals filled with memories I'd never been part of. Slowly, imperceptibly, she began drifting away, not physically, but emotionally, as though she were searching for pieces of herself I couldn't give back. Looking back now, I realized that moment marked the beginning of the end. The death of her sister didn't just break her heart. It broke us. She started questioning everything: her life, her choices, even our marriage. What once felt like a safe haven became suffocating walls closing in around her. And while I clung desperately to what we had, hoping time would heal the wounds, I failed to see how much she was changing. Until it was too late. After my sister-in-law's death, my wife began to change in ways I never anticipated. At first, it seemed like she was simply grieving, poring over journals, reminiscing about their shared memories, and trying to piece together a life without her best friend. But soon that grief morphed into something darker, more unsettling. She started talking about how fleeting life was, how we often take it for granted while chasing mundane routines. "What if I died tomorrow?" she'd ask me late at night, her voice trembling with an urgency I couldn't quite grasp. Would I have lived the way I wanted? Or would I regret everything? That question became the catalyst for a shift I wasn't prepared for. Suddenly, she was signing up for pottery classes, teaching herself rock climbing, and even planning bungee jumps, all things she'd never expressed interest in before. At first, I thought this newfound zest for life was healthy, even inspiring. But then came the conversation that shattered the foundation of our marriage. One evening, as we sat on the patio under the stars, sipping wine, she dropped a bombshell. What if we gave each other hall passes? Her words hit me like a freight train. A hall pass to sleep with someone else? It felt surreal, like she'd ripped the script of our 20-year relationship to shreds right in front of me. She tried to soften the blow, assuring me she still loved me, but felt she'd missed out on experiences by being with only one person her entire adult life. The idea repulsed me, not just because of the betrayal it implied, but because it revealed a chasm between us I hadn't noticed until now. How could she look me in the eye after 2 decades and suggest such a thing? That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I realized our perfect life wasn't so unbreakable after all. As my wife dove headfirst into her new "live life to the fullest" mantra, I couldn't help but notice how much of that life seemed to revolve around the climbing gym. At first, it seemed harmless, just another hobby she picked up in her quest for self-discovery after losing her sister. But soon, our trips to the gym became more frequent, longer, and shrouded in vague explanations. She'd leave early in the morning, claiming it was for a class or an outdoor excursion with friends, only to return hours later looking different. There was a glow about her, a restless energy that made me uneasy. It wasn't just the climbing, it was him. I didn't know his name at first, but he began creeping into our lives like a shadow I couldn't shake. One afternoon, while checking our daughter's location on Snapchat to ensure she wasn't sneaking off to some party, I stumbled upon something far worse. My wife's avatar was parked smack in the middle of the city, miles away from where she claimed to be. The bar's name glared back at me from the map, taunting me. My stomach churned as I remembered her mentioning a flirty guy at the climbing gym, a man who had once asked her out for drinks. Unable to ignore the gnawing suspicion, I decided to investigate further. That evening, when she returned home, she immediately headed for the shower without so much as a glance in my direction. Something felt off. Her gym bag lay abandoned near our bed, and inside, I found her phone. What I discovered next turned my blood to ice. Hidden beneath layers of seemingly innocent texts were explicit messages exchanged with an unknown number. They spoke of stolen moments, late-night fantasies, and plans to meet at the very bar I'd seen on the map. And then came the photo's blurry but damning snapshots that left no room for doubt. Each message was a dagger slicing through 2 decades of trust and love. By the time I pieced everything together, I realized this wasn't just infidelity. It was betrayal served cold, calculated, and deliberate. The moment I stepped into the dimly lit bar, my heart sank like a stone thrown into an abyss. There she was, my wife of 20 years, the woman who had promised to stand by me through thick and thin, laughing with another man as if I didn't exist. They were seated at a small table in the corner, their heads tilted toward each other, fingers intertwined on the tabletop. Her smile was radiant, genuine even, but it wasn't meant for me. It was for him, a stranger whose name I didn't know yet, but whose betrayal felt deeply personal all the same. The air around them crackled with intimacy, every shared glance and touch slicing through me like a knife. I wanted to scream, to march over there and demand answers, but something held me back. Instead, I stood frozen, watching the life we built together crumble before my eyes. When they laughed together, her hand resting gently on his arm, I felt my chest tighten, the pain almost unbearable. How could she do this? After everything we'd been through, the late-night talks, the sacrifices, the dreams we shared, she was willing to throw it all away for some fleeting connection. My vision blurred with anger and disbelief as I turned away, unable to watch any longer. But leaving wasn't enough. I needed justice. If she thought she could betray me without consequence, she was wrong. That night, I devised a plan that would expose both of them. I found out where he lived, what his wife looked like, and how vulnerable she might be to the truth. A few days later, I sent her a bouquet of roses with a note attached. Asterisk, meet me at the rustic table tonight. He's waiting. The words dripped with irony, knowing full well what awaited her there. As I sat outside the restaurant later that week, watching her storm in and confront them, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. Their shocked faces said it all. They hadn't expected to get caught. But revenge, I soon realized, wouldn't heal the gaping wound they left behind. The moment I walked into the rustic table, my heart pounded like a war drum, each beat echoing the betrayal that had shattered my world. She was there, my wife of 20 years, sitting across from him, their hands intertwined as if they didn't have a care in the world. Her laugh rang out, sharp and brittle, cutting through the hum of conversation in the restaurant. For a split second, I almost convinced myself this was some cruel dream, but then her eyes met mine. The color drained from her face, her smile faltering like a cracked mirror. Before she could react, his wife stormed in behind me, her heels clicking against the floor with furious precision. She zeroed in on them instantly, her voice slicing through the air like a blade. "What the hell is this?" she screamed, her words trembling with rage. Chaos erupted. His wife lunged at him, demanding answers while hurling accusations that ricocheted off the walls. My wife, no, ex-wife in my mind, now stumbled to her feet, stammering excuses that sounded hollow even to her own ears. I stepped forward, pulling out my phone. "You want to explain this?" I said, my voice cold and steady despite the storm inside me. I scrolled through the damning evidence, the texts, the explicit photos, the plans for their secret rendezvous. Each message was a bullet, fired directly at the fragile illusion of our marriage. Her face crumbled as the truth hung heavy in the air, undeniable and suffocating. "How could you?" I asked, my voice breaking under the weight of 2 decades reduced to ashes. That night marked the end of us. What followed was 8 agonizing months of legal battles, custody disputes, and sleepless nights. We fought over everything, our kids, the house, even trivial possessions, but nothing can mend what was broken. In the end, we walked away as strangers, bound only by shared scars and shattered dreams. The divorce proceedings were nothing short of a war zone, each court session stripping away another layer of my dignity and hope. In the end, I was granted primary custody of our children, a hollow victory in the grand scheme of things. The life we built together was now reduced to shared weekends and scheduled phone calls, a fractured existence that left me questioning everything I once believed about love and trust. Devon moved out quickly after the dust settled, leaving behind not just her belongings, but also the remnants of our 20-year marriage. She didn't fight for us, not really. It was as if she had already checked out long before I found her at that bar. Cutting ties with her wasn't just a legal decision. It was an emotional exorcism. Every memory we shared felt tainted, every laugh or kiss now laced with betrayal. I tried to focus on being the best father I could be, but the weight of her deceit pressed down on me like a laden sky. How do you rebuild when your entire foundation has been razed? I don't know how to move forward, how to trust again, or even if I want to. Love feels like a gamble I can no longer afford, and the thought of starting over seems impossible. For now, all I have is survival, waking up each day, getting through it, and hoping tomorrow will hurt a little less.